Hello, welcome to 1000 Words, Stories on the Way. My name is Matthew Clark, and I'm really glad you're here. I'm a singer-songwriter and an author, which means I spend a lot of time, humming awkwardly to myself and staring into space. But that's time well spent, because from it have come 8 albums, 3 books, and other writings, and of course this podcast. So that's kind of what I do, and in so doing, I hope to make things that make room for people to meet Jesus. And this is a work that's really only sustainable in community through the generosity of my patron partners. So if you think this work is worth supporting, you're invited to do just that. And you can find out more about how to become a patron partner by visiting www.matthewclark.net/partner. Thanks for considering it. Okay, so if this podcast is about helping each other to keep going on this pilgrimage with and toward Jesus, there are times when it gets harder for a lot of different reasons. But Jesus prepared us for inevitable suffering and discouragement. And he promised to keep a hold on us to the end, singing a song over us that radiates from the warmth of his unquenchable heart. But he was really realistic about the fact that this world as it is will break our hearts. We'll be tempted to give in to despair, capitulating to the cold-hearted tunelessness of evil. So today's essay is about God's surprising antidote to that temptation that springs up to bear witness to a kingdom of goodness and joy right in the midst of seasons of bitter winter. So here is this week's essay entitled, "We're Gonna Need a Song, Moses." The branches are covered with ice down here in Mississippi, which is unusual. So most people I know are hunkered down indoors. We made a big pot of chicken soup a few days ago that's been keeping us warm as the temperatures have dropped. Speaking of dropping temperatures, a verse that has come to mind over and over again the last handful of years has been a line spoken by Jesus after his disciples got him talking about the destruction of the temple and the hard times to come as the world's end approaches. And Jesus says that because of the increase of wickedness in those days, the love of most will grow cold. You can find that conversation in Matthew chapter 24. I have felt it in myself. I have felt the creeping coldness. When I see how wickedness seems to flourish in the world, climbing and climbing to the top of the heap again and again. And when I see how selfishness and scarcity have chilled the air in the habitat of my soul, I know Jesus was right. He was, as usual, deeply realistic about things, not to mention insightful of the human heart, meaning he always sees into it clearly. And yet, his own heart did not freeze up somehow. Jesus remained incredibly both clear-eyed about the wickedness of the world and the tendencies of the human heart, and he remained warm-hearted about the future. He wasn't blindly optimistic, it's worth noting. I mean, he didn't pretend like everything was going to be fine. In fact, Jesus' realism can be pretty uncomfortable. He sees the cross coming. He sees the eventual destruction of the temple and all the misery to come. But he also sees something else up ahead, something so bright beautiful and substantial that it thaws the ice. Or if it doesn't thaw it, allows him to somehow skate on top of it to his destination. He, as Hebrews 12 says, sees joy up ahead. And the writer of Hebrews says that if we can get a glimpse of that joy Jesus came to make available to us, it will fortify our hearts against the creeping chill of evil in this world. It won't remove it, of course. That joy didn't remove the experience of evil even for Jesus himself. He was still murdered all the same. Joy doesn't spare us heartache, doesn't spare us suffering, even unjust suffering. But it does give us something to contrast against evil. And joy gives us a promise of God's loving accompaniment in the midst of suffering, since joy is a fundamentally relational reality. Joy means someone good is glad to be with us. That good presence clarifies the difference between the works of God and the works of the enemy. The story the Bible tells is, in large part, that of a God who suffers unjustly at the hands of cold-hearted humanity. A God who, through a long, complicated process of relationship over time, continues to move with warmth towards those very people who treat him with such coldness. It's the story of a God who, against all odds and a world of opposition, holds on to the hope of saving the world from drowning in the waters of chaos because the surface of the lake had become an impenetrable layer of ice. He is always working to melt that barrier and call us up and out of those waters, making our passage through chaos a baptism into new life rather than a permanent prison. And so Jesus laments the wickedness of the world that is always threatening to freeze our hearts, to steal, kill, and destroy our joy, and drown us in despair. This week I've been watching the news. It is chilling. I am praying for my friends in Minnesota. And this morning, I was reading the end of Deuteronomy, where I found something that surprised me. But let me back up for a little context. In the history of God's relationship with his beloved and broken world so far, he's reached out to a man named Abraham, whose family is going to become a sort of custom-made people group. In order to save the whole wide world, God is going to make his focus really tight and work with one family. This family, over the next few generations, is going to get bigger and bigger while they're enslaved in Egypt. Then God will rescue them from Exodus. And at Sinai, he'll begin shaping them into a nation with a totally different cultural form from everyone around them. They're going to be weirdos, honestly, because the God who actually made the world has become strange to the world. So, Israel will be a custom-made nation whose culture God will shape in such a way that it will provide all the contextual structures for later on, when Jesus comes. So the things he says and does will actually be intelligible to the people he's trying to talk to. It's a long play on God's part. When we get to Deuteronomy, this is the second time God has brought his people to the very edge of the land he's been preparing for them. This is where, once they've settled here, God can continue the work of shaping them culturally as a curated context to support the salvation He's planning to pull off when Jesus comes. That context is necessary. For instance, without it, John the Baptist calling Jesus the, quote, Lamb of God is meaningless gibberish. But with it, all kinds of meaning clicks into place. But I mentioned something that surprised me about the end of Deuteronomy, right? Yes, at the end of the book, Moses is preparing to die, even as he is preparing the people to enter the Promised Land. And God is realistic about how this is going to go. Like Jesus in Matthew 24, He is clear-eyed about human hearts. And He's very honest with Moses about it. He knows these people's hearts are going to grow cold and wicked, even in the Promised Land. In fact, the Promised Land may just be the place where they get cozy enough to take the old warmth for granted, allowing the fire to die. But the thing that surprised me was God's tactic for addressing the coldness. After chapter upon chapter of listing all the laws He knows the people will eventually forget, God says something like, Moses, things are going to go badly, just so you know, but I've got this great idea. Let's write a song for them to sing. What? A song? Yep. God commands Moses to teach the people a song for when their love grows cold and they begin to slip away from the warmth of God's ways. Embed this bit of sung poetry into the culture. So the people have something like an axe for the frozen sea, to quote the title of a Ben Palpant book. As a songwriter, that caught my attention. This song is God's protest song against the coldness of His people's hearts towards Him and toward one another. It's a song that lays a picture of joy in contrast to evil. It's a song that wafts like smelling salts under the nose of a numbed-out brain. It's a song that's brutally honest about the terrifying consequences of giving in to the chill of wickedness, as well as beautifully hopeful about the God who never stops inviting His frigid lovers to sit by His hearth and learn the ways that lead to life. And it is a song that promises God will meet anyone that is icebound along the way to break them free of death's overwhelming grasp. God sings a protest song against our enemies and even against us when we have taken up the battle banner of rebellion against God's ways. He invites us to listen because if we do, this song will descend like dew, like showers on new grass, like abundant rain on tender plants. Can you hear the warm rain fall, like ice melting, caught up in the cupped hands of the crucified God, the God of perfect justice and abounding mercy? For me as a songwriter, I tend to try to make things as a way of processing and engaging with the pain and the hope of life. A couple of years ago, as a part of the Well trilogy, I made an album and a book, both titled A Tale of Two Trees. And in many ways, it's a protest album. It's an album whose central prayer is, "O Lord, don't let my heart grow cold." A Tale of Two Trees is about holding on to the way Jesus does things in the middle of a world that seems to frame everything in terms of power dynamics and fear. So to close us out today, I'd like to share a song from that album called Like a Lamb. Maybe it can have, or maybe it can live a little in the tradition of Moses' song at the end of Deuteronomy, kind of holding up a clarifying contrast to the ways of the world, as well as displaying the beauty of Jesus' totally different way of doing things.
Pride are just two sides, friend, of Caesar's tarnished penny. But quietness and rest belong to God. But who hasn't studied warfare on the battlefield of life here, perfecting self-defense just to survive? 'Cause you know how good it feels, love, to scratch the itch of anger. The complaining only chains us up inside. Feels like safety and power in a world so full of danger. Feels like danger to be grateful, small and quiet. But oh, I see the mighty word of God go silent to the slaughter like a lamb. And oh, I hear the voices of the crowd grow louder as the buried kernel's roots descend. 'Cause the roots beneath the surface search and listen for a music is and was and will be evermore. Like an acorn to an oak tree, who would ever think it could be that those little lambs might ever rule the world? But the meek will spread their branches above the clamor of the nations, and the sons of God will rest beneath their shade. And the politics of power seems so strong until that hour will fall into the traps their power laid. Oh, I see the mighty word of God go silent to the slaughter like a lamb. And oh, I hear the voices of the crowd grow louder as the buried kernel's roots descend. Nobody's free from hardship, and the briars in the garden can push their way so deeply down inside, till what started out so tender is choked out by the winter, and gentleness don't have a chance to flower. But don't let your love grow cold, dear, or by the lies that they've sold here. For the fools of God will fit along the roof. All their lives, they were the punchline. Now their laughing faces outshine every image Caesar thought would get him through. And oh, I see the mighty word of God go silent to the slaughter like a lamb. And oh, I hear the voices of the crowd grow louder as the buried kernel's roots descend.
Okay, friends, thanks for spending some time with me today on the podcast. If you found something good in it, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody. And let's keep praying together for God's ways to come on earth. But that's all for now. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week on 1,000 Words, Stories on the Way.